Not every Hollywood legend rests under a marble monument in the hills. Some chose graves no one can find. Others left the world with one final punchline, or blasted into space entirely. Because in the end, even the biggest stars found strange places to say their last goodbye. Gene Roddenberry, ashes scattered in space. Gene Roddenberry didn't just create Star Trek, he lived its mission. When he passed away in 1991, his burial became as revolutionary as his work. Rather than resting in a cemetery, a portion of his ashes were launched aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1992, making him the first person ever buried beyond Earth. And that wasn't the end. In 1997, more of his ashes were shot into deep space on a Celestis Memorial rocket. Years later, his wife Majel Barrett joined him in the stars. There's no grave, no headstone, just cosmic dust and a legacy floating above the clouds. It's the kind of farewell only Roddenberry could have scripted, infinite, boundary-breaking, and poetic. For fans, looking up at the night sky is now a form of remembrance. Because this final voyage wasn't fiction, it was Gene boldly going where no man had gone before. Fred Gwynne, the unmarked grave. No one can find best known as the lovable Herman Munster. Fred Gwynne's final resting place is nothing like the Hollywood spotlight he once stood in. When he passed in 1993, Gwynne was buried in a quiet, rural corner of Finksburg, Maryland, without a headstone, without fanfare, and without even his name marking the spot. Just a patch of grass in the churchyard of Sandy Mount United Methodist. Why so hidden? Gwynne was intensely private in real life, preferring art, writing, and life on his farm to the chaos of fame. He illustrated children's books, painted in solitude, and stayed far from the camera in his final years. His daughter once described him as a complex man, and this mysterious burial feels like a final expression of that depth. Fans occasionally make the pilgrimage, searching for a grave that isn't there, fitting for a man who once played a monster but lived like a ghost. Bela Lugosi, buried in his Dracula cape. Bela Lugosi didn't just play Dracula, he became a symbol of the character itself. And when he died in 1956, he made one last eerie request, to be buried wearing the full Dracula costume, cape and all. His friends honored the wish without hesitation. Lugosi now rests in a simple wooden casket at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, draped in the very cloak that made him an icon of horror. Some saw it as a gimmick, others as a tribute, but either way it sealed his image forever. Visitors leave plastic fangs, garlic, and handwritten notes beside his headstone, which reads, "He was a great artist, a prince of the theater." Even his ex-wife reportedly whispered, "Good night, Count," during the funeral. Though Lugosi once resented being typecast, in death he embraced the role that made him unforgettable. It's theatrical, tragic, and oddly touching, just like the man behind the cape. Jean Harlow, entombed in blush pink marble. Jean Harlow, the original blonde bombshell, dazzled audiences in the 1930s with her wit, beauty, and screen presence. But her final resting place might be even more glamorous than the role she played. After her sudden death at just 26, Harlow was placed in a private crypt at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, surrounded entirely by rare pink onyx marble. The soft blush tones match her signature Hollywood persona, radiant, delicate, and just a little surreal. Her mother commissioned the crypt, hoping it would be as unforgettable as her daughter. Inside, a vase of fresh flowers is still maintained to this day. But here's the twist. There's an empty space beside her. Rumors swirled for years that Clark Gable, her rumored love, reserved it. But Gable was buried elsewhere, and the space remains vacant, like a love letter never answered. Even in death, Harlow remains hauntingly elegant and quietly tragic. Frank Sinatra, buried with booze, cigarettes, and dimes. Frank Sinatra didn't just live on his own terms, he died that way too. When Old Blue Eyes passed in 1998, he was laid to rest in Desert Memorial Park in Palm Springs, far from the flashy cemeteries of LA. His headstone reads, "The best is yet to come," a nod to his iconic song. But it's what's buried with him that really stands out. Tucked inside the casket were a bottle of Jack Daniels, a pack of Camel cigarettes, a Zippo lighter, and a handful of dimes. The dimes? A throwback to when Sinatra demanded his bodyguards carry them, in case they needed a payphone to call for help. It's part myth, part legacy. Visitors still leave coins, booze, and love notes at his grave. The setting is quiet and unpretentious, just like the man who crooned about doing it his way, and clearly he meant it right down to the end. Martha Ray, the only civilian woman buried at Fort Bragg, known for her booming laugh and even bigger heart, Comedian Martha Raye left behind one of the most surprising burial sites in showbiz history. When she died in 1994, she wasn't buried in Hollywood at all, but at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the U.S. Army's elite special forces. She's the only civilian woman buried there. Why? Raye didn't just entertain troops, she lived alongside them. She toured battlefields in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, earning honorary military ranks and even training as a field medic. Soldiers affectionately called her Colonel Maggie, and she considered them her boys. Her grave is simple, nestled near the Special Forces Chapel, marked not by stardom but service. Visitors often leave coins and handwritten thanks. Raye once said, "I'd rather be remembered for making GIs laugh than making movies." And in the end, that's exactly how she's remembered, by the warriors she stood beside. Tupac Shakur, ashes smoked and scattered. Tupac Shakur didn't just challenge the system, he rewrote the rules of remembrance. After his death in a 1996 drive-by shooting, his burial became one of the most unconventional in music history. Part of his ashes were scattered at a Malibu beach, honoring his love for the ocean. But the rest, that's where it gets legendary. Members of his rap group, the Outlaws, claimed they mixed Tupac's ashes with marijuana and smoked them, fulfilling lyrics he wrote years earlier. "Last wishes, smoke my ashes if I die." Whether myth or truth, it became a defining symbol of Tupac's rebellious spirit. No public grave, no headstone, just waves, smoke, and whispers. Fans still leave flowers and poetry at the beach where his ashes met the tide. His final farewell wasn't about grief. It was a raw celebration of legacy, a fitting tribute to a man who lived fast, spoke loud, and never followed the script. Hal Roach, buried beside Mark Twain. Hal Roach, the comedy genius behind Laurel and Hardy and The Little Rascals, could have chosen any glittering plot in Hollywood. Instead, when he passed away at the age of 100 in 1992, he was buried far from the industry he helped shape. Back in his hometown of Elmira, New York, his resting place, Woodlawn Cemetery, the same peaceful graveyard where literary icon Mark Twain is buried. Roach once said, "I want to be where I started," and he meant it. Despite a career that spanned over 80 years and earned him an honorary Oscar, his grave is modest, a simple stone with his name and dates. Fans might expect grandeur, but find humility. Visitors who stumble across his marker often don't realize they're standing over comedy royalty. It's a reminder that some legends don't need monuments, they just want to go home. In the end, Roach's final punchline was a quiet one. Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices and one perfect epitaph. Mel Blanc, the voice behind Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and over 400 other characters, spent his life making the world laugh without ever being seen. But his gravestone, pure genius. Buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Los Angeles, Blanc's headstone famously reads, "That's all, folks," Porky Pig's iconic sign-off and a final wink to the audience. It's simple, sharp, and unforgettable, just like his voice work. Fans visit daily, leaving candy, carrots, and notes thanking him for shaping their childhoods. What makes his grave unusual isn't just the line, but the impact. While many stars fade, Blanc's characters still live on in cartoons, commercials, and pop culture. His resting place isn't flashy, but it radiates joy. Even now, standing over his marker, visitors often smile and hear his voice in their heads. It's not just a grave, it's the last line of a performance that never truly ended. David Bowie, a final disappearance in Bali. David Bowie was a master of reinvention, Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, Aladdin Sane. But in death, he chose no spotlight at all. When he passed in 2016, his body was quietly cremated and his ashes were scattered in Bali, Indonesia, following Buddhist rituals. The exact location remains a secret known only to his family. There's no grave, no shrine, just whispers and waves. It was Bowie's final request, a quiet farewell, far from flashing cameras or adoring crowds. For a man who spent his life transforming himself, disappearing into the serene spirituality of Bali felt like his final act of artistry. Fans now honor him through murals, tattoos, and street performances, but there's no physical place to mourn, just air, ocean, and legacy. Bowie once said, "I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring." And in death, just like in life, he kept that promise. Even in death, these stars refused to follow the script. Some vanished into space, others chose silence over spectacle, but all left behind more than a marker. They turned their burials into one last story, one final twist. Because legends don't just live forever, they're remembered in the strangest places.